So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here is Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your hosts, Dustin Lunt and Jake Trowbridge.
Good Tuesday evening, everyone. Welcome back to DTFF. Thank you for joining us, whether it be live here as we stream, or if you're joining us at a later date off of whatever platform you want to download the audio-only version on, or if you're catching the video here after the fact as well. Thank you. We appreciate it. Got a great show. We're kicking off our divisional breakdown series. I love this series. Get really in depth with every single team over the next 8 weeks or so here into the heart of summer. We finishing it off right about the time people are going to start really thinking about the upcoming season. So this is a really great primer for that and coming into redraft season. Before we get into it, though, my co-host with the most host, Jake Trowbridge. How are you doing this evening?
Better now that I know I have the most toast. Did you say most toast? Because
No,
I do eat a lot of toast. So that's just a weird factoid that you might have known about me. No, I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I also love these divisional breakdown series. Feels appropriate to kick it off with the NFC North as you know, you might know from listening to this thing that we happen to be Packers fans.
Or this right here.
Yeah, I don't know if your flags in the background gave any of that away to anybody, but we happen to enjoy a particular cheesy team. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah.
But how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just want to say before I really get into how I'm doing here, we saved the NFC North for last season.
That's right.
So we're flip-flopping snip snap.
We deserve this.
Snap.
Don't tell us we don't deserve this. All
That's
right.
right.
We did the right good thing last year.
That's right.
And now we're doing this thing this year.
But no, I'm doing great, Jake. It's a gorgeous day here. My back is doing better. I wrecked my back over the weekend. I couldn't get off the couch all day Saturday and Sunday, essentially. So I'm doing better. I'm happy that I'm upright and able to move around.
That's a good thing. Being mobile is a good thing, even for non-football players. You know, everybody should be. Did you get some good TV time in, some good movie watching happening maybe while you were laid up?
Sure did. It was great. The wife was working at our store over the weekend on Saturday, so I had like the whole afternoon to myself, which was amazing. And yeah, I watched dumb movies, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes I like to pretend that I have back problems just so that I can do something like that. But I don't actually. Hey, I don't know about you. I'm drinking something a little different tonight in honor of our Packers, in honor of the North, but mostly in honor of the Packers. I've decided to go full Wisconsin on it this week, and I'm drinking a brandy old fashioned.
Oh, you should have said something before the show. I would have totally made one too, and we could have been twinsies.
Man, I thought we had a mind read on that one, but that's all right. I'll enjoy this doubly for you. What are you slumming it with?
Modelo. It's summer. It's my beer of choice. Back to Modelo.
That classic Wisconsin beer, Modelo.
That's right. It never lets you down. It's never going to give you up.
It's the Rick Astley of beer.
It very well could be. that should be their slogan. Modelo, the Rick Astley of Mexican lagers.
They could get him to endorse it, I bet. What's he doing? What's he up to these days? He'd do it. I know that that's not the only thing that I'm drinking. I hear it's not the only thing that you're drinking.
True.
If I'm interpreting your comments pre-recording to be accurate.
True story. Yeah, I'm paying off the last beer bet as you are as well. We're clearing the ledger of the red. So that we can move on with this non-point scoring season and really just be fresh and clean. So, yeah, my last bet was something that we did on our home league draft day out of nowhere. Why we decided at this point to make this, but I said our dear commissioner Brian would not take a QB in round 13. You said yes. I pulled up our draft board here, and he did. He did.
Weird. It's a weird one. I don't know. We were just itching
Daniel
to
Jones.
make beer bets.
Yeah, I think we were. We were just like,
right.
And it was at that weird spot where a lot of quarterbacks had gone already, so I didn't think he would necessarily go for one quite yet. But
I just happen to know our league mates better than you do. That's all. I know their tendencies. I know our commissioner so well. I think this proves that I'm a better friend to the commissioner. Right.
That's fine.
I almost said you didn't have to pay this one off. You said, no, I'm going to.
No, a bet's a bet. I'm going to, if I make a bet, no matter how stupid, I will uphold that. So, Jake, you're an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius. Cheers, my friend.
Thank you. As you're downing that Fireball, I presume your fresh bottle of Fireball that
you know it
picked up. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and give mine off as well. We're done. This is the last one for either of us for last season. I said Curtis Samuel would finish the season as wide receiver 20 or higher at the end of it. He didn't. He started off really well. He really fizzled out. He was a wide receiver 3, a low-end one at the end of the season. It didn't work out. Me and this tequila are going to just give it our all. Dustin, you are an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius as well. Cheers.
Thank you. The tequila even. Woo.
I didn't think about the mix of that and a brandy old fashioned. I don't know that that's a pairing one would suggest typically, but it's happening.
We'll see how the show goes.
We'll see how this escalates.
Yes.
Well, look, I'm tired of talking about us. I want to talk about somebody else. Do you want to get into our drunk trade?
Let's do it.
Drunk, hammered drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
It's fun. I want to throw a little nod into what's happening with this being an NFC North episode. So I focused on an NFC North player. This trade comes from Reddit user KMay77. Says, haha, actually happened this past weekend. Side note, when somebody starts a sentence with haha, how do you hear it in your head when they talk? Is it like haha, or is it like haha? Is it a little bit like that kid from The Simpsons when you hear that?
When it's in the beginning of a sentence like that, I think more of the ha
ha. So there we go. That's how I'm going to interpret it then. Ha actually happened past weekend. By the way, this is 2 weeks ago, so a little late in getting this one on the show, but they traded away the 306 rookie pick for D'Onta Foreman, recent signee for the Chicago Bears. It's not earth-shattering, they say, but made me laugh when I realized it 2 days later. 2 days it took to realize that they had made a trade. So that's something that speaks to their level at the time of making it. But I loved this part. So this came from Reddit. Immediately under one of the first responses that came in to any of the submissions was BKE Burl, who said, I also drunkenly traded for Foreman. They gave away the 307. They both had basically identical value on them. Now, I don't know what you think, and we'll get into some of the meat of this later on with the Bears talk, but 306, 307, that seems fair for a caliber player like D'Onta Foreman, right?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, it's a whatever trade. Either side, I think, won on this one. Third round picks, especially mid to late third round picks, that don't do much for me. It's a kind of go get your guy kind of spot of the draft anyway. But Foreman, I mean, he balled out last year. He had a pretty decent season on a not very good Carolina team. So, Herbert gets injured, which God forbid, we don't want that. But, he was shown that he could handle a pretty good workload and looked fairly well. So I don't hate it as kind of that insurance handcuff. I shouldn't say handcuff because he's not really a handcuff, but have kind of that next guy up type player on your roster, especially with running backs. It's nice to have those dart throws like that.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, who are you going to get with the 306 or 307 that you're going to be so smitten with? To be fair, in my own rookie drafts, there's actually a decent chance you could have landed Darnell Washington, tight end. If this was like a tight end premium league, I would much rather have him, I think, over Deonta Foreman as a pure upside play. But that's the type of rookie that you were looking to add to your team here with this. So I don't think it's egregious at all. No. Obviously, there's some shared sentiment amongst these Redditors about it. So I like that. And with that, let's go ahead and move on.
Let's get into it. So, Jake, which team? Should we just go down the list here? I don't have them in any particular order. I'll be honest. This was a copy and paste job from the show sheet from last year. So should we just start with the Lions?
Yeah, I think we should. Records be damned. I want to start with the Lions, and you know who I want to end with. So let's do this.
Yeah. All right. So the Lions, they were 9-8, took second place in the division. Good job, Lions. And I'll be honest, it's hard for me not to be rooting for them a little bit this year. Only because, hey, scampers, only because they've been bad for so long. It's nice to see them like getting up out of the cellar. Would have been nice if this happened, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. And the division could have been really competitive for a stretch there. I just don't like it that the Packers are in a perceived little decline right now. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, we'll go through this. For those of you listening, have been with us the last few years. We go through the notable losses, notable additions, the draft picks, and then we wax poetically about the team. Does that sound good, Jake?
It sounds great.
Okay, good. All right, so notable losses. Jamal Williams, running back, DJ Chark, wide receiver, and Quintez Cephas, wide receiver. Notable additions, David Montgomery, running back, and Marvin Jones coming back into the fold of Detroit, wide receiver. And in the draft, round 1, Jahmyr Gibbs, running back. Second round, Sam Laporta, tight end. Round 3, Hendon Hooker at quarterback. And round 7, Antoine Green, wide receiver. So, Jake, just based off of these offseason moves, how do you like that for the Lions?
I think that the Lions did enough. They did enough to put themselves in a decent, respectable position for finishing 9-8 last season and saying, we're on an uptick. Our coach, our staff is going to build this team up. We're not going to make any drastic decisions with this. That's how I read this entire thing, because you are losing Jamal Williams, who I thought was a great locker room guy, if nothing else, seemed to be very much the Dan Campbell type of player. So losing him, you added David Montgomery and you added Jahmyr Gibbs. Of course, one loss you didn't quite note in there, probably for personal reasons, is DeAndre Swift, who ended up getting traded away on draft night, or during the draft, I should say, to the Eagles. So you might look at that as kind of staying pat. I think they just thought, we're going to make tweaks. We're not going to make wholesale massive changes, but we're tweaking things here. So I think it's pretty interesting. I think one name that I just love to see there is Marvin Jones returning home. I love a good homecoming story. What can I say? I'm a sap that way. What sticks out to you?
Yeah. I mean, I like what they've done overall. The Jahmyr Gibbs pick at 12 overall was a little surprising. I'm not going to lie. Obviously, they made the trade, got rid of Swift, so that kind of cleared up that whole backfield thing. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is basically going to be Swift from last year, and Montgomery is going to be Jamal Williams. You can probably pencil it in for the same type of production for those two players. Sam Laporta, some people that I've been listening to that are much smarter than me about rookies, really like that landing spot for him. Someone to just keep an eye on, especially Dynasty. Hendon Hooker, I like that pick as a guy that had some injury, this offseason or end of last season. He's not expected to start or play this year, which I think is good for him. He'll be able to sit behind Jared Goff and learn. And then who knows next year what's going to happen. That's next year. We don't care about that right now. But I do think that's a good spot for him just to kind of sit and learn the NFL game. So I really like what they did as far as the draft and what they're doing as far as building up this team. Obviously, they had other moves with offensive line and bolstering the defense and that, but we don't care about that for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, that's bullshit, man. That's not what we care about, even though it does play a part in fantasy to some extent. Offensive line play certainly does. I think we've both been just hiding away from this, though. Can we just take a moment to say goodbye to Quintez Cephas, wide receiver from the Wisconsin Badgers? He finally got cut loose. It's too bad.
It is. So, Jake, I know I touched on it, and I thought that with Gibbs that he's basically replacing DeAndre Swift, and I would expect that type of role. How do you feel about him, or what are your expectations for him for this season?
I think it's a little simplistic to say that David Montgomery is Jamal Williams, Jamar Gibbs is DeAndre Swift, but I understand the impulse and the implication of it. I always understand the implication, but I think that Jahmyr Gibbs presents more upside than DeAndre Swift, not because he's a totally different player or better player, but because the coaching staff hopefully doesn't think that they have to mitigate his workload as much as they did DeAndre Swift. Like with all of his injuries that were happening the last couple of years, coaching staff was pretty upfront about it, saying like, yeah, we want to, keep him healthy. We want to be able to utilize him from the start of the season to the finish. That meant he wasn't going to get a crazy workload. For fantasy, we just cared about the passes for the most part. We cared about his receptions. Jahmyr Gibbs should absolutely have that role. I do start to wonder how much he cuts into what I thought was going to be a prime role for David Montgomery before he was drafted, before Gibbs was drafted. I thought David Montgomery was getting undervalued probably by the community for this year because I thought he was going to take on dual workloads of the Williams plus the Swift to some extent. Now I'm not so sure if I want David Montgomery at all on my teams because I think he is going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent. To your point, probably like Jamal Williams.
So just for reference, DeAndre Swift finished as RB21 last year. Do you think that's a good floor or ceiling for Gibbs?
If you are drafting Gibbs at what his ADP is likely to be, that has to be his floor because otherwise you're going to be very disappointed. I do think that it probably is much closer to his floor than his ceiling. I think a top 12 season is for sure within his range of possibilities. Just depends on what we see from them during training camp, what we hear about David Montgomery. How much do they fawn over this guy?
Right.
Or is he just healthy?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really detracted from Swift last year was Jamal Williams, having 17 touchdowns. So, right. Even if you would have given 4 or 5 to Swift, that would have jumped him up, in the total points quite a bit. So it'll, like you said, it'll be interesting to see on how that all shakes out and what the chatter is in the training camp and everything. So let's talk about another guy. I shouldn't say injured coming into last season. That's Jamison Williams, who a lot of people thought had he been healthy going into last season, he would have been the first wide receiver off the board in the draft. Fell to the Lions, didn't have to fall very far. We didn't see much from him. Couple flashes, couple big, 45-yard touchdown receptions, which was nice to see. Suspended for the first 6 games of the season. I know we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, so we don't have to get into that part of it anymore. But when he comes back and is on the field, what are your expectations for him? And where do you think you would be comfortable drafting him come redraft season?
Well, I'll get that part out of the way first. I'm not drafting him for redraft. I went through this last year to some extent with DeAndre Hopkins, who is a more sure thing. DeAndre Hopkins also suspended 6 games to start last season. Of course, when he came back, he was DeAndre Hopkins, and he was fantastic. We saw that. We knew what to expect. And it was still difficult for me to put too high of a price tag on him in redraft because you have a dead spot on your bench for 6 weeks that you need for roster churning in those first 6 weeks. It's so crucial. for somebody like Jameson Williams, yeah, we can have high expectations, and certainly for Dynasty, I have some fairly high ones, not as much as consensus, but for redraft, I'm not willing. So I'll let somebody else deal with that. If he's available on waivers, the week before he comes back, that's a different story. Because when he does return, I think that there's a pretty decent chance that he hits the, 7 to 8 touchdown mark pretty easily. And he's a little bit more of the Christian Watson type of guy that we saw last season. Spoiler alert, for an interdivisional foe. But I think he's going to be a big play guy for sure. And he's going to win you some weeks. But I'm just not that patient. Are you putting him on your board right now? Do you have, if he's available in the mid to late rounds, are you interested?
I could be. I mean, it really depends on what I know it's such a generic answer. It really depends on what my team looks like. I was going to try to see if I can find any sort of ADP right now.
ADP's rough outside of best ball right now. It's not very valid, I don't think. But let's say hypothetically, he's sitting there in the 10th round, which I think is almost certain, or close to the 10th round. You have 3 wide receivers, right? You feel confident in your core of running backs. Maybe you're deciding to wait on quarterback, whatever your play is, but you have 3 guys you're comfortable with for wide receiver. At that point, do you say 10th round, Jameson Williams, welcome aboard?
Yeah, I think so. I think I just found on fantasy data, I don't know how accurate this is or what their ADP is, but it said that he was going 148.
I can't do math. I know you're just supposed to divide by 12. I can't do that math. Are you
No, he's going
kidding me?
235. So I mean, he's
basically undrafted then.
He's way down there right now. Again, I don't know how accurate that is or what their sample size is, but yeah, I mean, for a guy that's going to miss, essentially half the fantasy season almost, it's just like unless he really falls in the draft and I have a real solid core of wide receivers, then maybe I'd take a shot at him, hit the double-digit rounds if he's still hanging around there. I don't think he will be, though. I think because he's going to be able to practice with the team and be part of training camp and part of the preseason games. Jesus, I think you're going to see him flash, and that's going to get people excited. So he'll probably be too rich for my blood.
Yeah, anything above undrafted is too rich for my blood there, which I would have said the same about their quarterback last season. Honestly, in redraft, I wasn't really wanting much of Jared Goff. Jared Goff now has, I guess, an interesting array of weapons this year because it's a lot of turnover, but I don't view it as detrimental necessarily. I mean, they lost Hawkinson halfway through last season. That we went through who they lost. DJ Chark is probably their biggest weapon that they truly lost over the offseason. But, it could still be dump off city and he would be having a good time because he has Amon-Ra St. Brown and you don't need too much more, right? To make yourself valuable. Do you value him as draftable in one quarterback redraft leagues?
I think so, yes. I mean, he threw for over 4,400 yards last year, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, was the QB 10 on the season. So I expect him to, it wouldn't surprise me if he repeated that. I really wouldn't. He's got the weapons there. Jameson Williams coming back the second half of the season. They replaced Swift with Gibbs that we already talked about, replace the tight end. So I don't see a reason why this offense would regress too much. Maybe there'll be some slight regression, but I expect more of the same from Goff this year. And if I'm punting the quarterback position and not worrying about getting one of those early big name studs, I'd be happy with him. I mean, I had him as my second quarterback in our redraft league last year, and I ended up starting him like the second half of the season. Over Kyler, and I know Kyler got hurt towards the end of the season, but
you were kind of forced into it a bit.
But I was still starting him some weeks before Kyler actually was out because he was just playing that well. So yeah, I like him as kind of a later round quarterback if that's going to be your strategy.
Yeah, I think I don't know. He's a guy you have to talk about. By the way, Scampers in the chat, I'd much rather take some backup running backs and maybe trade for Jameson in weeks 3 to 4 if I'm stacked.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree
Yep.
with that method, Scampers. I think with Jared Goff, the one thing that worries me is maybe in their estimation, upgrading the running back room. Saying we're taking health out of it, right? With Swift, sorry, we gave you chances. We couldn't believe in the workload. So here's this young, fresh kid, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. They've seen handle a significant workload. We've talked before. Jamal Williams, the first time he ever did it was last season. Prior to that, he wasn't the big workhorse guy. So maybe they see David Montgomery and they say, all right, we can feed you. We can feed you a ton. And Jahmyr Gibbs, now you're just a little bit more exciting, a little bit more versatile. We can so utilize you in the pass game, all that. Maybe they don't want to throw it as much. Dan Campbell seems like that kind of guy, right? Who would say, I want to keep control of the game, control the clock, use that tough guy mentality. And maybe Jared Goff does not come close to 4,000 passing yards in that situation. And with Jameson Williams suspended for a bit. So that does give me some pause. He's still not going to be somebody on my mind for one quarterback leagues. I think that in Dynasty, you're worried about, obviously, the following year, does he even have a job? And he might not. So he's downgraded, I think, the most from anybody on this team for me.
Okay. Any last thoughts on the Lions before we move on, Jake?
I just want to say, Marvin Jones, go get yourself 10 touchdowns and have a farewell tour.
I like that. All right, let's move on to the Bears. They were 3-14, finishing 4th in the division. Notable losses. I can't keep my homerism out of this. I'm sorry, folks.
So
no, I'm not sorry.
Especially because that could be us this year. You're inviting.
I know it probably will be, but that's fine. Come at me then at the end of the season if that's the case. Notable losses: David Montgomery, we just talked about, Trevor Siemian, Byron Pringle, N'Keal Harry. Notable additions: Travis Homer, Robert Tonyan, Deonta Foreman, Dante Pettis, Nathan Peterman, and DJ Moore. And in the draft,
really buried the lead with the notable addition there. Just tagging DJ Moore at the very end.
Honestly, I forgot all about it until after the fact. I was like, oh crap, got to throw him in there. And then draft picks in the 4th round: Roschon Johnson and Tyler Scott, both in the 4th round. So the Bears, they made some moves, try to give Fields some support. They brought in a legitimate wide receiver 1 for their team, as opposed to, obviously Darnell Mooney was not ever going to be a wide receiver 1. He's more of a wide receiver 2. You had Chase Claypool. You had just a bunch of guys. Cole Kmet. We're still going to see if he's going to be a thing. We'll get to him in a little bit. They brought in some running back help to back up Herbert. I do like Roschon Johnson. I think he could end up stepping into that RB1 role, especially if Herbert gets injured. I know we talked about Johnson possibly having that role, but I do think Roschon Johnson could and probably will be the guy that does that. So I think the Bears, they're pointing up. But Jake, I want to know, will Fields take that step forward this year now that they've given him a legitimate wide receiver 1? We saw it a few years ago with Josh Allen when they brought over Stephon Diggs. We saw it last year. A.J. Brown went to the Eagles. We saw what Hurts did. Is this going to be the year for Fields to take a step forward now that they have this legitimate wide receiver 1?
I think he has to take a step forward. I think history says that that's true. I do want to temper people's expectations about this a little bit because we say, right, Josh Allen took the step when he got Diggs. Hurts did take a step when he got A.J. Brown. They were 2 very different steps, 2
Correct.
very different levels. Josh Allen's percentage went up drastically. His passing efficiency, his passing yards, his everything, drastic increase. It was like 35% or something absurd. Hurts, yeah, he had to step up, but it was like, 10%. I think that's more of what the expectation should be for Justin Fields rather than the Josh Allen thing. Because it's enticing. I get it. It's very exciting to want everybody to take the next Josh Allen leap. But with Justin Fields, I think it's just as likely that they try to balance out the run game more than they do try to make him a pass-heavy quarterback. Like, I could see them wanting to protect him a little bit, maybe. And so now we got 3 decent running backs. We could go ahead, give all of them a rotation. And Justin, yeah, you can run sometimes too. Let that be your option. DJ Moore is also, to me, not quite the alpha that Stephon Diggs or AJ Brown is.
Oh, I would
Zero
agree.
Disrespect to him.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
But more of like an Allen Robinson type, who's very good, was a very good player, not when he was with the Bears, but he was a very good player prior to that. And that's more DJ Moore. So I think it's going to be good for Fields. For fantasy, I don't think it matters. We want him to rush. That's where his value is still for right now. So I think he'll be, a top 5 guy very easily regardless.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has to go up from here. I mean, he only had 2,200 yards passing last year, and he had 1,100 yards rushing, which the rushing will probably take a little bit of a dip. Not much. I'm not going to predict that, but I would expect his passing to go up a little bit. I mean,
yeah,
I just 2,200 yards is nothing. I mean, you have to try not to throw that much. So yeah, I just expect him to finish probably where he did. He was top 6 last year.
Yeah, I believe he was.
He was number 6. He was number 6. So I would expect him to finish around that area only because he does have that rushing upside. But I would hope that they could take a little step forward in the passing department because he did pass well in college. He wasn't just a rusher in college. So I'm hoping that they're able to get him back to that a little bit, only to prolong his career. So he's not, out there rushing as much as he did.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting how he will potentially affect DJ Moore. And if we want to talk about the other pass catchers there, we can. Mm-hmm. I'm not very excited to talk about any of the other pass catchers. And that includes the tight ends, including our boy Bobby Tunyon. You traitor. You damn traitor. Which, by the way, all he has to do is get shipped off to the Vikings next season, and then he'll have played for every single NFC North team that's there. So that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Look forward to that. But with DJ Moore is really the thing. So, yeah, he's still the undisputed number 1 there. Disregard what I said about his alpha status. In this room, he's the alpha.
Mm-hmm.
But is he going to be significantly upgraded from his routine wide receiver 2 finishes in fantasy, which are typically mid to low end? It completely depends on, does Justin Fields cross 3,500 passing yards? Does he sniff it? Does he get close to that? I'd say 3,200 is a good metric. Maybe he does. Maybe he adds 1,000 yards passing this season.
I would hope so. I mean, DJ Moore historically has had 1,200 yard seasons roughly every year.
Yeah.
He is not going to get 50% of the passing yards on the team. That's just next to impossible for that to happen. Assuming that translates over, he's just consistently been that guy with multiple quarterbacks. So if we're kind of projecting that similar type production, you would have to expect Fields' production to go up as well in the passing area.
Yeah, so this is not a tandem. This isn't a thing of, stacking a quarterback with his wide receiver in drafts. That's very popular. The idea being if one of them has a blow-up game, hypothetically, the other one probably does too, if it's the number 1 receiver with their quarterback. This isn't a situation where I'm trying to do that. Whether it's best ball, whether it's redraft, whatever it is, you have to have these 2 guys tied together. Just regardless, yes, for fantasy, DJ Moore, if people are going to start treating him as, a top 15 guy just because it's a new city, then I'm not interested in him for redraft.
Yeah, let's talk about one of his other pass catchers here. It's gross, and we don't really want to talk about it, but it's Cole Kmet. has had a lot of hype around him over the last couple of years. Did finish as the tight end 8. I know that's kind of whatever. But he was a fantasy viable tight end.
Sure.
Buoyed
as
more
anybody can
so
be.
with the touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns, which really helped him.
Mhm.
So how are you feeling about Cole Kmet? Is he
was the
someone you should be targeting later in drafts? If you're punting the tight end position, do you have any interest in getting him and say, like, I don't even know what other tight ends, like a David Njoku and Jordan Akins, just to like get a group of tight ends you can stream via
No.
No,
God,
nothing.
no. It's the same deal. He might as well be suspended for the first 6 games because there's no chance that I'm drafting him in my redraft leagues. And he doesn't get the excuse of being exciting after that point. There's no excitement with Cole Kmet. You might as well at that point just stream every single week tight end if that's your deal, because you're just chasing a guy who might score a touchdown in that week. So then just play the defenses rather than trapping yourself with a guy like Cole Kmet, who you might trick yourself into wanting to keep on your team. No, I'm fully out on him.
Just no.
I won't have Bobby Tunyon either.
No.
I don't want any pass catchers. Darnell Mooney, if he really falls in drafts, like I'm talking late rounds, and he might, then yeah, he was great as a number 2 option alongside Allen Robinson. He really was. And he could return that same level of value or close to it, this season. So I would probably default to Darnell Mooney being based on value, the one that I'll end up with out of all of these guys.
Right. Yeah, I don't hate that. He could end up being a good bye week fill-in, flex play type option for you, kind of like he was a couple years ago. So I like that. And let's talk about this backfield real quick here. It's kind of messy. We don't know, David Montgomery was the guy there. Khalil Herbert has flashed, but he did get injured last year. I think we're all expecting Herbert to kind of take that backfield or be the 1A of a committee here. But they brought in a bunch of guys, Travis Homer, Deontay Foreman, and then drafted Roshan Johnson in the draft. So they obviously felt like they had to bolster the position, or that Herbert maybe is not a guy that can be the bell cow back. So how do you see this backfield shaking out, Jake?
I think if we can rely on Luke Getsy and his limited tenure with the Bears, the idea should be that in training camp, they figure out a very clear hierarchy. And they say, we know who our running back 1 is. And we as fantasy managers then know that at the start of the season. That should hypothetically be how it goes, because it wasn't a rotation previously. Khalil Herbert was really great in the limited time that he got when David Montgomery was injured. When David Montgomery came back, it was just, here you go, David. It's your backfield again.
Yep.
There wasn't a split. So I think that's how it should go. But again, maybe they just say, we've been doing this all wrong. We got to rotate you guys to keep everybody fresh. I'm going to err on the side of what I said earlier, that it's just, there is a clear 1A at least. I'll probably take whoever is the lowest in draft capital come redraft. Whoever falls the most is probably the person I'll scoop up just to hold on to and see what happens.
Okay. Any last thoughts about the Bears before we move on?
No, just enjoy your time in the sun, Bears fans. Enjoy it. Cherish it.
All right, let's move on to the NFC North champions, the Vikings. They were 13-4, as I said, took first in the division. Notable losses: Irv Smith and Adam Thielen. Additions: Josh Oliver and Brandon Powell, whoever that is. And in the draft, in the first round, took Jordan Addison. In the 5th round, Jaron Hall, QB. And in round 7, Dwayne McBride at running back. Jake, why don't you give your thoughts about the Vikings here?
First of all, how dare you? Who is Brandon Powell? Who is Brandon Powell? He says, desperately Googling who Brandon Powell is so he can make his co-host look silly. I don't know. Again, notable in quotes as always.
As
the
always.
loss of Adam Thielen is the most striking thing, and who they're potentially eyeing to replace him is, because there is a world for a number 2 wide receiver in this offense specifically. Kirk Cousins, say what you want about the guy, he's carried 2 wide receivers a lot of his career, even back in the Washington days. Like, he had Pierre Garçon, and then he had some other guy that was there and actually fantasy viable. We might not have known who that was until midway through the season, but it happened. And so I do think that there's an opportunity for a couple of guys. So Jordan Addison, obviously, first-round draft pick. He should get a pretty significant chance here. Or maybe KJ Osborne in training camp, who looked pretty good last year, was the number 3 in targets and has, really big play potential there. Maybe he does enough to insert himself into the conversation. But I think people who are just going, it's Justin Jefferson, and then I'm not going to worry about it, I think that's losing a lot of potential fantasy value.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jordan Addison's going to walk in, and I think he'll be a wide receiver too. Every year, there's at least 4 NFL teams that support 2 top 24 wide receivers.
Yep.
Every single year. And I don't see why that can't be the Vikings this year. Justin Jefferson, he's going to command targets, and he's a stud, like, plain and simple. But defenses just can't roll double coverage over them all the time and expect that Jordan Addison wouldn't catch a bunch of balls then, I expect them both to be top 24 wide receivers. Justin Jefferson, obviously a wide receiver 1, if not the wide receiver 1 come the end of the season. That would surprise me one bit. But yeah, I love the pick. I know you had called it going into the draft, like the Vikings, have an opportunity here to draft one of these wide receivers, and they did. So good call there, Jake. I'll give you props on that again. But yeah, I think, the fantasy outlook for, all these pieces on this offense are great. Kirk Cousins, he's going to be that low end QB1, high end QB2 that he is every single year.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson, gimme. Hawkinson, really liked what we saw from him after he was traded to Minnesota. I would expect that usage would remain the same. And then for the running backs, whether it's Dalvin Cook, who we can get into here if he's going to be traded, or if it's Alexander Mattison, there's going to be plenty of volume there, and they're going to be fantasy viable. So, for fantasy purposes, this team is gold, and I don't think you can go wrong by taking any one of these pieces. But I do want to talk about the backfield here. It really looks like that Dalvin Cook will be cut June 1 once the cap hit is reduced.
Miami Dolphins, your new running back is Dalvin Cook.
We'll see. So that being said, Alexander Mattison walks into the running back 1 position unless the Vikings were to bring in like Leonard Fournette or Zeke or something, basically replacing one old running back for another, and
with a worse running back.
Yeah, with the worst running back. So I don't think they would be there necessarily to be the bell, to be the 1A. I think that would still be Madison, and they would be there to spell it. So assuming that's the case, how high does this bump up Madison in redraft for you?
Madison's one of the rare handcuff backup guys that every time he steps into the main role, save for maybe a game, he does almost what Dalvin Cook will do for your team for fantasy. He's a no-brainer. He's the de facto, exactly who it's going to be. Again, unless they sign Fournette. Even if they sign Zeke, it's still going to be Madison for me. So who it's going to be. The production to expect. You should be drafting him pretty close to where you'd be drafting Dalvin Cook. Like maybe not at the end of round 1, but at the start of round 2 then. That's the gap that should be from Dalvin Cook to Alexander Mattison for me. I do want to touch on Kirk Cousins really briefly because we just have to, because nobody else does. Nobody else talks about Kirk Cousins. Nobody else wants to talk about Derek Carr. These types of quarterbacks are not thrilling for fantasy football. But I think it was Ian Harditz who had tweeted out maybe today, maybe yesterday, the points per game quarterback finish for Kirk Cousins over the last 3 years. Quarterback 12, quarterback 12, quarterback 12. Pencil him in for quarterback 12 again this year. Wait and scoop him up at the tail end of your draft. Live with the value, love the consistency, and fucking enjoy, man. But yeah, for me, Madison is so close to Dalvin Cook. Are you downgrading him, or are you in line with that? Would you value him close to Cook?
I would value him maybe like 80% of Cook. I don't know. I just, without seeing him for long stretches, we've seen him in short, cleanup work and, the occasional game that Cook would miss. So I don't know. Taking him, say even at the late second round, at the end of the second, seems really rich for me. But if you were to fall to like the end of the third, early fourth, I think that'd be a amazing value. I don't think that will happen though. I think you're more right that it would be kind of in that early second range.
Sure.
I don't know that I could pull the trigger on him in particular that early.
Can I give
and I'm not saying it's a bad move. I wouldn't fault anyone for doing it. Me personally, I don't know that I'm that on board with Madison over an entire season.
That's fair. I just want to give you his 4 starts that he had in 2021, right? And they were a little spread out, to your point. So they weren't back to back to back to back to back. There was a little bit of space in there. But first game, 26 carries, 112 yards. Also had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 59 yards. Second game, 25 carries, 113 yards, 7 targets, 40 receiving yards. Third game, he had 22 carries, 90 yards, 3 targets, only 34 yards. What a bum. What a goddamn bum this guy is. And then he split a little bit of time in his fourth game, and he only had 13 carries for 41 yards. Still had 4 targets and 29 yards. Like, even at his worst, everybody has bad games. Everybody's kind of whatever. He still finished as a top 15 running back in that kind of down week. So I'm just, as somebody who's been in the system, to me, it's like a Tony Pollard situation, except we've only viewed him as a handcuff from here on out. So I hope that his value is a little bit depressed, but I would draft him comfortably high.
Okay. Well, we shall see once redraft season chugs along here and where ADP starts shaking out. But yeah, like I said, either way, I wouldn't hate it if you did decide to draft him super early. But for me, that's right now. If I had to make the draft right now, it'd probably be a little rich for my blood.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. Anything else with the Vikings here? I know it's a little bit short, but
I mean, what we want to talk about.
I know, with the Vikings, like I said, we know what this team is. There shouldn't be really any surprises with the fantasy producers on this team.
Top 5 overall team for fantasy production in the NFL.
Yeah,
I would say pretty comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we spend a little bit less time. It's not because we hate them any more than the other teams in the NFC North. It's just we know they're one of the few teams that are guaranteed fantasy gold. So and it hurts my soul to say that. So let's move on. Last but certainly not least, save the best for last. Let's put it that way. Our hometown Green Bay Packers finished third in the division at 8-9. Notable losses. I didn't even put the headliner on here. Aaron Rodgers. He's just out of my fucking psyche already. Just not even on the show sheet.
Not even going to acknowledge him. Just ghosting him, deleting him from your memory banks.
Yep. Deleted. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Robert Tonyan. Notable additions, none. The typical Packers way, do not make any splashes in free agency. And in the draft.
Did you hear Kiki QT is working out for the team though as of today. I mean,
Who
stop
is?
the press. Kiki QT.
Oh.
Don't pretend like you don't know who that
No,
is.
you broke up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you broke up a little bit. I couldn't hear
Okay.
you, so I was genuinely asking. That's great. I remember, 4 years ago when I was really excited about him as a rookie.
Breakout. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And then in the draft, the second round, they took Luke Musgrave, tight end, Jaden Reed at wide receiver. In round 3, we took another tight end at Tucker Kraft. Round 5, we took a quarterback and Sean Clifford, and also grabbed wide receiver
Grant Dubois.
Dontavian Wicks.
Dontavian Wicks.
Dontavian. God damn it. Thank you, Jake. And then in the 7th round, another running back, Lou Nichols III, and Grant Dubois, wide receiver. So big changes, obviously here. The first time that we don't have Aaron Rodgers at the helm since 2008. So a long time, lots of stability there. The quarterback room. We did see Jordan Love a little bit in some game action over the last couple seasons. Looks like from his rookie season till now, he does have a better grasp of the offense and the NFL game speed from the limited action we've seen, which is nice. But for me, it's going to be really interesting to see two things. One, how this offense actually looks, because with Aaron's experience in the league and just his football intelligence,
do the play as called.
I'm going to call it his football intelligence, or refusal to actually play the play that LaFleur called in. So it'll be interesting to see how this offense actually looks with LaFleur actually his plays getting played. And Jordan Love, I can't imagine that he's just going to do his own thing. And then seeing how these young wide receivers take a step forward, because all we have is just young wide receivers, second-year guys and rookies, essentially right now. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, these guys all take a step forward. So those are the things I'm really looking at come this season. I mean, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, I think they'll be just fine. If anything, they should probably get a little bit more usage, I would hope, especially since there was games last year where we saw with Aaron Jones where, he'd only have like 6 or 7 carries by the end of the game. And it's just like, what are you doing? You give a guy that's as talented as him or AJ Dillon more carries. So I do feel like they're going to get more usage this year. So it might be a little bit more of a balanced offense rather than a super pass heavy one. What are you thinking as far as what this offense is going to look like this year?
Yeah, I'm most excited for those running backs. I'm very excited about Aaron Jones, very excited about AJ Dillon. I'll be having so much of them on my draft boards. It'll be absurd, and I'll feel justified this time in doing it because I do think that they're going to rely crazy heavy on them. Mm-hmm. It can't be overstated how young this offense is. It's fucking absurd to have basically your elder statesmen be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Samare Toure, who were all rookies last season. Maybe they add a veteran late in the offseason, to try to find somebody for cheap to come on board. Sure. Mm-hmm. If they add a Jarvis Landry or something for cheap, fine. I'm good with that. But as it stands, Aaron Jones is going to be doing a lot of work, or should be. And I really do. I know it was kind of a joke, but I really do think like Aaron probably checked out a lot of the run pass option plays and just said, fuck it. I'm going to chuck it 20 yards downfield. I expect Jordan Love to do that a little bit less, maybe rely a little bit more on feeding his running backs as he finds his footing. So at least to start the season, I could see them being incredible draft values. Do you want to talk about the wide receivers? Obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting. I don't know what to expect. This is the first year where I could look at all these guys, include the tight ends in the mix. I don't know that I know who the number one is. I think everybody is assuming Christian Watson. It makes sense for people to assume Christian Watson. I just want to point this one thing out. So Watson and Romeo Doubs played 5 games together last season when both were basically healthy.
Right.
The 5 majority of games, not a game where somebody gets concussed on the second play, where they actually played together, and their averages, it was rough. So Christian Watson averaged 6 targets, 3.5 receptions, 49 yards. Didn't score a touchdown in that time. Romeo Doubs averaged 4.5 targets, 3 receptions, 30 yards. Didn't score a touchdown in that time. When they were playing together, Alan Lazard was the main funnel for Aaron Rodgers at that time. Bobby Tunyon was involved, and then there was the running back still. Jayden Reed, I know people are very excited about his versatility. I don't think it would surprise me if Jayden Reed came out by the end of the season and led them in all-purpose yards or scrimmage yards, I should say. Do you have a read on who you really want to lock into for these guys?
If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast with you, Jake.
Rude. First of all, rude.
Well, I'd be off making big money somewhere,
Yeah.
protecting
Bring me
things.
along. God.
Well, fine. It's really hard to say, but I mean, I think until I see differently, I'm going to say Christian Watson, only because we did see him perform last year. He made some big catches. He scored the touchdowns, which really buoyed him. But I mean, he did have some big games. So, and that's what they drafted him was for those big plays. So until we see it from Dobbs, staying healthy, or, Jayden Reed coming in as the rookie, I'm just going to lean with Christian Watson. I honestly don't know who I would be drafting in redraft this year from this group. None of them I'm really confident on to be a week-to-week contributor for me. They're more flex plays, bye-week fill-ins at this point. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in these receiving pieces for the Packers.
Yeah. Now, other prognosticators out there are suggesting that the Packers have one of the easiest strengths of schedule. That's all I've seen since the schedule releases. The Packers have one of the easiest strengths of schedule. Obviously, at this early stage, it's a little foolish to hang your hat on that. But let's say that that's true. Does Jordan Love give you any interest at all? Maybe not in 1 QB leagues, but where does he fall if you're in a 2 QB league, for example?
I think he'll be a mid-range QB2. I mean, we've seen, and it's so hard to compare, as we talked about. You had Rodgers, LaFleur came in and totally changed this offense. So I feel like, from when we had McCarthy as the head coach, we saw the offense really sputter and was really stagnant. LaFleur came in and totally revitalized the offense with a lot of the same pieces around that McCarthy had. So just based on that fact, I think Love can have success, but like I said, kind of like a mid-range QB2. I'm not looking for, I think his ceiling would be like a high-end QB2, like just outside of QB1 range, but that's only if everything goes exactly the right way and he has this amazing season and does better than everyone projects, basically. But otherwise, like I said, mid-range QB2, someone that in a Q2 QB league, you'll feel comfortable starting every week, but I don't think the ceiling is there for it. I think he'll have a good floor, but just not the ceiling.
Which is probably why my only frame of reference for ADP right now is best ball type of formats. Even the eliminators that are happening right now, it's a best ball format. But in every iteration of this, including underdog, he's going crazy low. He's, not higher than quarterback 22, I want to say. And that makes sense for best ball. I don't believe that there's going to be crazy spike weeks. If he gets them, it's going to be because Christian Watson had himself an amazing day. Right. And he'll spike.
Breaks off a big play. And
a little shuffle pass and he takes it to the house 70 yards. And that's the kind of day that he has. For redraft, I think that there's some merits in 2 quarterback redraft leagues for being like, if the schedule is really that easy, let's fucking roll the dice on this guy, as opposed to I don't know what the hell's going on with Matt Stafford right now. I have no clue about his health. Do I want to roll with Jimmy Garoppolo? Not really. I never do. I would much rather try for somebody like Jordan Love in that case.
Mm-hmm. And then, Jake, I know you're high on both Dylan and Jones this year, but realistically, what do you see their fantasy finishes looking like? Because they're both going to be Aaron Jones. I'm assuming he'll be drafted in late second, early third. Dylan will probably be in like the 5th or 6th round, I'm guessing, just based off of like last year's ADP and where they were going. I can't imagine that they're going to move a ton. So given where their expected ADP are, we'll just say 3rd and 6th round for this exercise. Will they return better value than that? And what kind of finishes do you expect from them? Or what would like their ceiling be for finishes?
Aaron Jones' ceiling is going to be the most homer fucking thing that I've said on this podcast in a long time. It's well within the range of possibilities that he's a top 8 guy, and I think he could finish a notch higher than that. I think outside of like the top 4 guys that are super locked in, Aaron Jones belongs in the picture with everybody else. So yeah, CMC, Bijan, I get it. Like you're not going to be drafting him above those guys, but I see him contending with like the Josh Jacobs of the world. And I do believe that you will not have to draft him as high. I actually expect him to be available, and sitting there in the 4th round, and I'll be scooping him up every damn time that he's there because I think he has an incredibly high ceiling. AJ Dillon, I do not believe his ceiling is that high. But I do think for the running back dead zone that is so common around that era, if I want to look at Brian Robinson, right, for the Washington Commanders and Antonio Gibson or A.J. Dillon, I'm going to go with A.J. Dillon because I know what I can expect with him, I think, in terms of volume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Aaron Jones last year, in what we consider a down year, finished as running back 9. So I think you're right spot there.
Pretty up and down though.
Yeah, he only had 2 rushing touchdowns and 5 receiving touchdowns, where AJ Dillon had 7 of the rushing touchdowns and none of the receiving ones. AJ Dillon, just for reference, was running back 26 on the season, so just outside RB2 territory. So yeah, I think finishing in that like 8 to 9 range, basically where he did last year, that I could see. I don't know that he'll have the ceiling to push much higher than that, though. I think getting him at 8 or 9, that's going to be his ceiling for the most part. I have concerns about this offense as a whole, staying on the field long enough and producing long enough drives that they, can rack up those yards. So that's the only hesitation I have with that. But like I said, considering last year we thought that was a down year for him, considering the lack of usage he had during stretches of games, he finished very well. So I could see that very easily happening again.
I love it. Let's just book it. Just write the script, NFL. Write it already that these guys are going to get crazy amounts of carries and targets. We know that's how things work. Just give it to them.
Just do it. Do it. Okay. Any last Homer thoughts about our Green Bay Packers, Jake?
No, I would love to say something really snarky here about how y'all better watch out. Green Bay Packers got their 3rd Hall of Fame QB in a row. I'm just excited to have no expectations, not low expectations, but no expectations for the season. I think it's going to make it a lot more fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am crossing my fingers and hoping we have a 3rd Hall of Fame quarterback at the helm here. I know we've been very blessed as Packer fans to have that stretch of quarterback play over the last 30 years. Hopefully it doesn't come to an end. We'll see. But I'm just glad that the whole saga with Rodgers, and is he going to retire? Is he going to get traded. All that baloney that was been going on the last couple of years is finally behind us, and we can move on to a new chapter in Packers lore. So I'm looking forward to it from that aspect. And like I said, more to see what this offense truly can be with LaFleur. And if he's as much as a genius as we think he is offensively. So that's really what I'm really most excited about. So
Heck yeah.
All right. Anything else about the NFC North here, Jake, before we sign off for the week?
No, I'm just excited to get into the rest of this madness here over the next few weeks. We hope to be joined by some other non-us people, by the way, representing their teams. Of course, this one was just special for us, but
That's right.
I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, everyone, for listening in. Thanks to Scampers in the chat joining us. We appreciate you, and everyone else that happens to join us live. We appreciate it. Go give us 5 stars, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all that good stuff. And until next week, folks, keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.